The next section is called, Does God Have a Big Toe? Long ago, all the people lived in one place called Babel. Not only did every person live in the same place, but every person spoke the same language, all of which made life very easy. Getting the news was easy. You didn't have to learn a new language in high school. But Arena question changed all of that. Arena asked, Mommy, I have a big toe, and you have a big toe, and Daddy has a big toe. Does God have a big toe too? Now, everything might have been all right if Arena's mother had just said, Arena, God is not a person. God is a special and invisible and wonderful, and God is the creator of the universe. God has made each of us in God's image, but God is not a person, and that is why God does not have a big toe. But Arena's mother was very busy with something and said, Go ask your father. So she did, but Ariana's father was also busy and told her something and said, Go ask your grandpa. So she did. Grandpa was in his garden digging up weeds with his pal Fred, who worked at the king's palace. Arena asked, Grandpa, I have a big toe. Mommy has a big toe. Daddy has a big toe, and you have a big toe, and Fred has a big toe. Does God have a big toe too? Now, Arena's grandpa was very old and a little hard of hearing, and he said, Does God have a big hoe? Why, I don't know if God has a big hoe. I suppose if God has a garden, he must have a hoe. After all, you can't get rid of weeds without a hoe. Fred whispered to Arena that he would ask the king the next day at work. The king thought and thought, and then issued a proclamation. You, the people of Babel, will build a tower up to the sky so that I, your king, can stand on top of the tower and look at the God's foot, and then I will tell you if God has a big toe. The king ordered the builders to use only the best bricks and the best tar to stick them together, and the Tower of Babel grew higher every day and higher every day after that. Now, God knew that if everybody was working on the tower, then nobody was working on the fields growing things. Nobody would be at the shops making things. And God knew that soon all the bricks and tar in Babel would be used up, and the people of Babel would have nothing left to use to build houses. God thought about just knocking over the tower, but God knew for sure that the Babylonians would just build it up again to see if God had a big toe. There was only one thing to do. The next day, when Arena came to watch the work on the tower, she heard Fred ask his friend for a brick, and his friend answered, Ma'atan, and returned to the other guy with tar, who said, Agrito? And asked the guy with the shovel, who said, Como está? And looked at the fellow with the wheelbarrow, who said, Moonshine. Soon, bricks and tar were flying everywhere. And by the end of the day, people who spoke the same language were heading out of town together. Arena and her family decided to leave town too, with Fred, Grandpa, and a few other people they could still understand. They packed up everything they owned and left Babel. On the cart, Arena was quiet for a while and then asked, Mommy, I have a belly button, and you have a belly button, and Daddy has a belly button. Does God have a belly button too? The next one is called Finding the Right Man. Most people do not realize it, but God puts in calls to other people before finally putting in a call to Abram. First, God called Eber and said, Eber, leave your country and your neighbors and your family and go to a land I will show you, and I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you will be a blessing. All who bless you will be blessed, and all who curse you will be cursed, and through you all nations on earth shall be blessed. But Eber said, Who are you? And God said, God. And Eber said, The God of what? And the God said, The God of everything. And Eber said, Don't be ridiculous. There is no God of everything. There is a God of the sun, a God of the moon, God of the night, a God of the day, a God of the mountains, a God of the valleys, a God of the forests, a God of the deserts. If you ask me, you're a little late. Everything already has a God. And There is no God of everything. Maybe if you look hard, you can find something that doesn't already have a God. As a matter of fact, I think there's no God of frogs at the moment. Why don't you go check that out and we can talk, because there's just no God of everything. But Eber and God never talked again. The next person God called was Peleg. God said, Peleg, leave your country and your neighbors and your family and go to the land I will show you, and I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. And all who bless you will be blessed, and all who curse you will be cursed. And through you, all nations on earth shall be blessed. And Peleg said, who are you? And God said, God. And Peleg said, where are you? And God said, I'm everywhere. And Peleg said, if you're everywhere, where do they put the statue so that people can bow down to you? And God said, I'm invisible, and no one may make a statue of me. Peleg rolled on the ground with laughter. Now let me get this straight. You're an invisible God of everything with no statue, and you want me to leave my home and follow you to a place you will show me. Do you think I'm crazy? Now look, why don't you go to the idol maker and have a nice sculpture made of your image, and then we can find a nice place to put it where people can bow down, and then we can talk. But God and Peleg never talked again. Then God went to Serug. He said, Serug, leave your country and your neighbors and your family and go to a land I will show you, and I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. All who bless you will be blessed, and all who curse you will be cursed, and through you I will make a great nation, and all of the earth, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. And Serug said, who are you? And God said, God. And Serug said, what will you give me? And God said, I just told you. And Serug said, you don't understand. I'm not interested in moving anywhere. I don't, or doing anything just so that my great, great, great grandchildren will have a great nation. I want to know what is in the deal for me right now. Maybe if you showered me with some of those blessings up front, I might be convinced. How about giving me all the money in the world and the kingship of all the lands? What do you say? But God said nothing. And then Serug said, all right, let's be reasonable. I will go wherever you want for most of the money in the world and the kingship of the 5 largest countries. How about that? But God said nothing. And that was the last Serug ever heard from God. By that time, God wasn't sure about finding the right man, but God went to Abram and said, Abram, leave your country and your neighbors and your family and go to the land I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, and you will be a blessing. And all who bless you will be blessed, and all who curse you will be cursed. And through you, all nations on the earth shall be blessed. And Abram said, I will go, but there's just one thing I want. God asked what the one thing was, and Abraham answered, I want to take my family with me. God asked him, that's it? You just want your family to come with you? Don't you want to see me? And Abram said, no. And God said, don't you want me to bow down to a statue of me? And Abram said, no. And God said, Abram, don't you want anything for yourself? And Abram said, no. Right then, God decided not to ask any more questions, and God let Abraham gather his family and pack their things for the journey to a place that God would show them. Right then, God knew that the right man was going to the right place at the right time for the right reasons. God also knew that such things hardly ever happen. I wonder which of those people in the story would we be most like? Hard to know, isn't it? We always want to think we'd be the right one. The next story is called Rebecca and the Camel Who Made No Noise. Abram, whom God renamed Abraham, told Eliezer, his servant, to go back east and find a wife for his son, Isaac. Eliezer didn't want to go, but Abraham told him that God would help out by sending along an angel. Abraham had no idea at the time how God would do this, and frankly, neither did God. Now, Eliezer wasn't an angel. The other servants weren't angels, so that just left the camels. God figured he would make one of the camels into an angel just for the trip. After all, the point of the journey was to find a wife for Isaac. And to do this, Eliezer and the angel had to watch the women of the east without being noticed. God figured that if Eliezer took along a guy with wings, white robes, and a halo, and a heart who floated through the air, they might be noticed. So that is why the angel had to be a camel. When God asked for volunteers, nobody raised a wing, so God called upon Max, who was the angel God called upon for really tough jobs. Max was the one who had to tell the extra lions and tigers they could not go on the ark with Noah. Max was the angel who had to kick the snake out of the Garden of Eden. Max was the angel who had to collect the slimy bugs for Adam to name. And Max got all the tough jobs. So the caravan to the east finally took off with Eliezer riding on Max. Max found that speaking camel was a cinch, but making the other camel noises was not so easy. So one of the girl camels liked Max and kept licking his nose. Now, Rebecca, the granddaughter of Abraham's brother Nahor, was sweet, kind, and beautiful, and she loved animals. People in the town said that Rebecca could speak languages of chipmunks and rabbits and lizards and snakes and elephants and mice and eagles and goats, but Rebecca did not like camels. And it was not the fact that they were ugly. It was not the fact that they drank so much water that she had to go to the well 100 times to fill their humps. What bothered Rebecca most was the loud camel noises they made. But one day, Eliezer and his caravan of 10 camels, really it was 9 camels and a Max, came to the well of the city where Nahor lived. They arrived late in the afternoon, and the women of the city were drawing water for their flocks and sheep and goats. And there were not many camels in the city where Nahor lived because people didn't travel much. Also, they had a small well and worried that too many camels would drink up all the water. When the women saw Eliezer and his camel caravan, they shooed them away. Go, get out of here, find another well. Eliezer started to leave, but the camels sat down and started to make every noise they could. Rebecca came over to Eliezer and said in front of all the women, "You may drink from the wells, and your camels may drink too." Then Rebecca walked over to Max and looked at him in a funny way. She spoke to him in camel, saying, "You're very sweet. You did not complain, and you did not make loud camel noises. Come, you shall be the first to drink." Max answered her in camel, "My humps are still full. Water the other camels first." So Rebecca led the camels to the well, and they drank, and Eliezer drank, and finally Max drank. Rebecca worked most of the day drawing water for the flocks and camels. In the morning, Eliezer asked Rebecca to return with him to become Isaac's wife, and she said yes. So the caravan of Eliezer came to the city of Nahor with 10 camels, but left with only 9. Rebecca looked all over for the quiet camel who did not make camel noises, but she could not find him. Up in heaven, Max was climbing out of his camel suit. God kissed Max in a way that God kisses angels and thanked him. Then God said, "Max, in a little while, I'm going to need an angel to speak to Moses out of a burning bush. There is a fireproof suit over there in the corner. Why don't you just try it on for size?" I'd never thought about God having a special angel for the hard jobs, but maybe he does. I thought of a lot of questions in that too. I'm looking forward to more of your questions. I love questions. I think it's how we learn so much about God and about each other. So be thinking of your best questions, write them down, send them to me, ask me, call me, however you want to give me questions, okay? All right, the next one is called The Strong Man Who Cried. Jacob cried a lot. He cried when he was happy, Jacob cried when he was sad, but mostly Jacob cried when he saw beautiful things. The sight of a fresh new flower or sunset would fill him with happiness. And then he would just cry. He couldn't help it. But his father, Isaac, was not happy about having a son who cried a lot. Isaac would not take Jacob hunting because Jacob would cry at the thought of some furry little animal becoming his supper. So Isaac would take his other son, Esau, who loved to hunt and never cried. "Why can't you be more like your brother Esau?" Isaac would scold Jacob. "He hunts and he fights and he never cries. He's a real man." And Jacob would answer, "I cry when I feel like crying. I just can't change that." Then Isaac would stomp off kick the dirt, and mutter strange words. Meanwhile, Rebekah, who was Jacob's cousin living in a place called Haran, was also having trouble with her father. I'm sorry, Rachel, not Rebekah. Rachel was a shepherd, and this drove her father Laban crazy. Day and night, he would yell at her, "Get away from those sheep and goats. Why can't you be more like your sister Leah? She doesn't smell like sheep. She sits in the tent and cooks and sews. She's a real woman." And Rachel would answer, "I like being a shepherd. I just can't change that." Then her father would stomp off, kick the dirt, mutter strange words. But there was one part of shepherding Rachel did not like. The well for watering the flocks had to be corked up each day with a huge rock so that all the water would not gush out and dry up. The rock was so big that every morning the shepherds in the area had to push together to move the rock off the well. And every night they had to gather together to push it back on. One day, on the way to the morning rock pushing, Rachel saw a new man at the well. He was small and fair-skinned with warm brown eyes, and he was talking to the other shepherds at the well. Suddenly, this little man all by himself pushed the big rock off the well. The shepherds were amazed. The man approached Rachel and said, "My name's Jacob, the son of Isaac and Rebekah. I am your cousin, and I have come a long journey. I'm very happy to see you." Then Jacob kissed Rachel and started to cry because she was so very beautiful. And when the other shepherds saw Jacob crying, they said, "He's strong, but real men don't cry." And they walked away. But Rachel did not leave Jacob. She sat by him on the rock, and they watched the flocks drink from the well. Rachel said, "I never saw a man as strong as you who cries." Jacob looked at Rachel and said, "I never saw a woman as beautiful as you who is a shepherd." They laughed, and Jacob cried. And then after a time, they went home together. And now we have the coat of many colors. There. Brown, yellow, green, white, black, silver, red, and purple. These were the colors Joseph saw when he looked down at the beautiful new coat his father, Jacob, had just given him. And strange as it might sound, he felt the colors looking up at him. One day, Joseph dreamed a dream. He dreamed that he and his brothers were all bunches of brown wheat, and only his bunch of wheat stood up, while his brothers' bunches all bowed down to him. Joseph's brothers hated him for that dream, but Joseph didn't care. He was amazed that the brown color of the wheat in his dream was exactly the same color as the first brown stripe in his coat. As if things weren't bad enough, Joseph had another dream, and he told his brothers. In this dream, Joseph's brothers were stars in the sky, and the father was the sun, and his mother was the moon. And all of them were bowing down to Joseph. After this dream, Joseph's brothers hated him so much that they left the camp to tend to the flocks far away from Joseph. Even Jacob and Rachel were not happy to hear the dream, but they loved Joseph way too much to be angry with him. And Joseph was amazed that the second stripe on his coat was the same shining yellow as the sun that had bowed down to him in his dream. A few days later, Jacob sent Joseph to check on the flocks and make up with his brothers. Joseph finally found his brothers tending the flocks on the green hills near his home. Joseph was beginning to be afraid of the coat because the next two stripes on the coat were of many colors, were green and white, exactly like the colors of the grassy hills and the white flocks. Joseph's brothers saw him and grabbed him and took his coat of many colors and threw him into a dark black pit where they decided how to best get rid of him. Without his coat in the blackness of the pit, Joseph could not see the next stripe on the coat and of many colors was black. The caravan of traders was on their way to Egypt, was passing by just then, and the brothers decided to sell Joseph as a slave. The silver of the 20 coins flashed before Joseph's eyes as he was being pulled from the pit, and nobody even noticed the crumpled coat of many colors whose next stripe was the same silver color as the silver coins. When Joseph was gone, the brothers dipped his coat of many colors into the blood of a goat so that they could lie to their father and say a wild animal had killed Joseph. But they were so happy to get rid of him, they didn't even notice the next stripe on the coat was red. The brothers returned the coat of many colors with all the blood all over it to their father Jacob. He fell to the ground and cried out all of his tears, and then he cleaned the coat and for many days held it in his arms just like you hold a baby. He never believed the story about Joseph being killed by a wild animal. Never. Years later, a great famine hit the land of Israel. There was no food anywhere and everyone was starving. Jacob told his sons to go down to Egypt and to try to buy some food. When they arrived at Egypt, they were brought before a great Egyptian prince. He had a golden crown and a golden sword, and his robe was deep, beautiful purple, the last color of the last stripe of the coat of many colors. They did not know that the Egyptian was really Joseph, their brother. Joseph had done very well in Egypt. He gave his brothers food, but ordered them to return with his younger brother, Benjamin, whom he loved very much. When they returned to Egypt with Benjamin, the Egyptian told them that he was really their brother, Joseph. The brothers were frightened at first, but Joseph told them he was not angry with them anymore because they had brought Benjamin safely to Egypt. Joseph sent the brothers back to the land of Israel one more time to get the rest of the family and bring them to Egypt where they would not starve anymore. Jacob was very old when he saw his son Joseph again. Joseph cried and Jacob cried and the brothers cried. Even the Egyptians who were watching cried. Then Jacob bent down and took from his bags a coat of many colors. The brown, the yellow, the green, the white, the black, the silver, the red, and purple stripes on the coat were not as bright as they once were, but they were still very beautiful. Gently, Jacob picked up the coat on his shoulders and put it on his son Joseph, and nobody hated anybody anymore. And that's the story of the coat of many colors. There's one more section to read in this, which we'll talk about next week. But I am so wondering what questions these bring up to you. Because if you know the stories, you know they're not exactly like they are in the Bible, but they're close enough to give you ideas of questions they might be asking. What questions did you find?